Welcome to Japanatron. Japanatron.
Hello, and welcome to Japanatron. This is the premiere episode of my podcast. Japanatron, as you may have guessed, it's a podcast about life in Japan, Japanese culture. Today's topic, something that means a lot to me, it's smoking. Smoking in Japan. Japanese love the golden tobacco. Why is that? Why do the Japanese love smoking the cigs? Whereas in America, it's banned all over the place, or taxed. Well, let's see. Let's go through some differences here. In Japan, tobacco, cigarettes, they're cheap. They're not really taxed. Unfortunately, beer. They tax the crap out of beer here. Beer is insanely expensive. Cigarettes are insanely cheap. Pack of 20 cigs, 400 yen. In better economic times, that was about $4. And that is actually after a 100 yen tax on the pack. So they used to be 300 yen. So, yeah, they're cheap. What else? They're everywhere. You can get them in vending machines, something that I haven't seen since I was a little kid. You know, going to Denny's, you see those old school vending machines where you pull the big handle. Those things are banned all over the place in the U.S. No, they're everywhere here. You can get high-tech, there's high-tech, vending machines selling cigs everywhere. And it was funny because, the obvious thought is, what about underage kids, high school kids? Couldn't they get cigarettes that way? Well, yeah, they could. So, fortunately, Japan instituted this kind of card system. What do they call it? Tasco or something like that. And you sign up, and, register your ID or whatever. It says you're over, you're of age, 18 or whatever. And then you tap this card on the vending machine, then you can buy it. So thank God for that, at least. But hey, it's everywhere. They also advertise tobacco like crazy. In the U.S. it's banned. There's real strict rules about where you can and cannot advertise cigarettes. But in Japan, those rules don't really apply. You'll see TV commercials, for cigarettes. And the real scuzzy, it's not like Marlboro Man, smoking a cig out, on the ranch. It's something like a bunch of people cleaning up the park, and then, they're helping the environment, they're cleaning up the cigarette butts or whatever. And then at the end, it's like, JT, oh, by the way, when you drop your cigarette butt in the park, we'll clean it up for you. That's the kind of advertising they do. The other thing that's kind of scuzzy is they'll put the logo on like sports teams. I remember the women's volleyball team here in Japan would have the JT tobacco logo. I think it's Japan Tobacco or something. That's one of the biggest companies here. And I never understood that association. How could you connect smoking cigarettes with volleyball? They do. The other thing is it's culturally accepted. This is a smoker's paradise. And not only is it culture, but it's just very... The way that Japan is structured is it's very accommodating to smokers. And I think it's not so much the culture, as much as the fact that the tobacco companies own Japan. And they own the politicians. Because they make it real convenient to be a smoker. Not only is it cheap and everywhere and advertised, But, they got these smoking rooms, these refresh rooms, and you go into this kind of like cordoned off glass room with these high-tech filters, So, daddy can go smoke his cig and mommy and baby aren't disturbed by it, So, there's those things. And then there's the smoking section in the restaurants, which, I don't know why that isn't banned yet, but, in the U.S., my home state of California, smoking is banned everywhere. Bars, restaurants, you can't smoke anywhere. And it's also taxed like crazy. Not so in Japan. So, like I said, tobacco loves Japan. So it's really not so much that Japan loves tobacco. There's that, of course, but it's the tobacco companies own this country. They own it. And I swear the lawmakers and the politicians, they gotta be smokers themselves, or something, under the table campaign contributions or something is going on, because the tobacco companies love it here. It's probably one of their last large remaining markets, because every other developed country has taxed and banned the crap out of cigarettes. So, to coin a term, the Japanese politicians hesitate to legislate, probably, because their money is probably coming from the tobacco companies. Something scuzzy's going on there. Now, you may have guessed I'm not a big fan of smoking. So let's talk about that for a minute. And I'll present some analogies here. Now, let's compare smoking with drinking alcohol. So I'm sitting in a bar, and I'm drinking a beer. My drinking of the beer does not disturb anyone else around me. I'm not giving off any fumes, unless I get drunk and chuck on someone. I could just sit at the bar, drink a beer, and, in essence, no one is really disturbed by that. However, if I light up a cigarette, I'm giving off fumes, carcinogenic fumes. It could disturb other people. Everyone else has to smoke my cigarette as well. Whereas if I'm drinking a beer, I'm drinking the beer. Okay, so along with that, here's another analogy. Suppose I'm not smoking. What is the difference between me smoking a cigarette, giving off fumes, and say I eat Indian food for breakfast followed by Thai food for lunch, and then I go to the bar, and I'm farting like a madman, just emitting massive amounts of gas from my asshole. What is the difference between that and smoking a cigarette? I would say nothing. I would say there is no difference between me farting like a madman and lighting up a cigarette. And in fact, the only difference really is that lighting up a cigarette is something preventable, whereas me with horrendous gas probably isn't that preventable. I got to get the gas out there somehow. It's nature, whereas smoking a cig isn't. Everyone's got a vice, and here's my problem. So, the vice in Japan is smoking, I would say, one of the primary ones. In America, it's overeating. The diet is terrible. So, God bless America for that. You can overeat, but you don't disturb me. Why doesn't Japan adopt some vice that just doesn't bother me? Okay, and here's another thing. At work, people take smoke breaks. What is it, like once an hour? They can go downstairs outside and smoke a cigarette. So, say like every hour, 15-minute break. That's pretty nice. That's a good deal. Why can't I take a beer break, or a whack-off break or something? Why do the smokers get that privilege of taking a smoke break, whereas I don't have anything like that? Even coffee break, I don't get to leave the office and go outside. That'd be cool. Maybe I should do that. So, that's the reason why I hate smoking. Okay. Now, what does Japan need to do, in my humble opinion? Well, obviously Japan is way behind on anti-smoking legislation compared with the U.S., with other industrialized countries, even industrialized Asian countries like Singapore. A pack of cigarettes there is something like $12 last time I remember. They need to tax the crap out of it. Come on, everybody's doing it. Join us. That's how you stop people from doing something annoying like this. You tax the crap out of it. You price people out of the game. You make it expensive. Okay, so let's try that. The other thing is, Japan does have anti-smoking laws, but they're really not enforced. It's really lame. They put these signs up that say, please don't smoke here. And then the area has cigarette butts all over the floor, all over the ground or whatever, and then, it reeks like cigarettes there. People do it anyway. These little suggestions, they indicate way too much faith in the human race. Because I don't care, whatever country you're in, there are douchebags everywhere. And if you put up a sign that says, please don't do that, people are going to do it anyway. You got to give them some incentive not to. And I'd say one of the easiest incentives is their wallet. Let's fine them. Let's say $100 fine, 10,000 yen. 10,000 yen fine for smoking here. That's a little bit better. Fine them. Give the cops, the authority to fine people. And one of my big gripes is called aruki tobacco, which means walking and smoking. In a city like Tokyo, you got mass numbers of people walking up and down the sidewalks. And if you get one douchebag lighting up the cigarette, everyone behind that guy has got to smoke the cigarette. So they put signs up that say, no walking and smoking. Okay, stop and smoke instead. And everybody does it anyway, which pisses the crap out of me. And obviously it's not just me, because obviously people have complained, because there's these old guys that I think probably retired. They got nothing else better to do. But God bless them. They work for the city hall, the ward offices, and they're called Aruki Tobacco Patrol. And they wear these like special vests or these armbands, and they stand around on these high traffic areas, and they stop people and say, hey, don't walk and smoke, when they see people doing it. Because that's how ineffectual the signs are. The signs are totally useless. So they get these patrol guys going out to tell people, put the word out. hey, news flash, everybody. It's rude to smoke and walk and blow the smoke in everyone's face behind you. Did you know that? It's actually rude to do that. Why don't you give those old guys the authority to fine people? Because once people start getting $100, 10,000 yen fines, then maybe they'll stop doing it. They'll think twice. Or confiscate their cigarettes that should be taxed. Okay. Ban smoking in more places. Here's another good one. Okay. Now, yeah, why hasn't there been some big-ass lawsuit? All the waiters and waitresses suing, for, workplace hazards and stuff like that. Why is smoking still allowed in restaurants? Okay. I remember I even saw a smoking area in a hospital. That was shocking. There were doctors in the doctor lab coat things, smoking. I'm like, dude, you're a doctor. Haven't you heard of it? Haven't you heard of something called cancer or strokes?
I guess not. Gotta smoke a cigarette.
So let's ban. Hey, could we start with the hospitals? Maybe smoking should be banned in the hospitals. A smoking area in the hospitals. Unbelievable. Refresh room. Refresh time. Ban it in restaurants. Bars. Okay, let's get to that one eventually. After you tax the hell out of it. So, generally speaking, there's got to be some violent protests and some big-ass lawsuits to get this stuff through, because those smoking politicians sure as hell ain't going to do it anytime soon. I mean, we need some, like, bullhorns and, some riots on the streets or something expensive with lots of lawyers, someone getting sued, American style. God bless America for that national sport of suing people. Gotta love that. And generally speaking, Japan really needs to step up on promoting its culture of health. It does a great job of this in general. Fish and rice. What a great base for a diet. Very healthy. People are slimmer here. Americans in general are overweight, something like 2/3 of the population in America. Japan, I think, is number 2, right behind Korea, which are right neck and neck for the lowest obesity rates. They do a pretty good job. They got sports day, okay? I have to get a health check every year with that's funded by my company. It's part of working. I have to get a physical every year. I don't think the U.S. has a requirement like that. In general, Japan does a really good job of promoting a healthy culture. The smoking thing is just one of those bad marks on its record, shameful marks, and they really should address this. And I mean, I did a little research on this, and I was looking at the number 1 killers in countries. And in America, it's no big surprise that heart disease is the number 1 killer in the U.S. because everyone is overweight. Let's face it. The diet in America, okay, that's a topic for another podcast maybe. It's insane. Especially, ever since moving to Japan, it's opened my eyes. Well, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about, we're talking about Japan. Japan, the number 1 killer is strokes. And I got to thinking, I was like, well, what causes strokes? Well, it's, hypertension. Okay. Japan, is famous for having, the workplace having a high stress environment. Well, smoking doesn't help. And in fact, smoking has been proved to exacerbate hypertension. Everyone thinks, smoking relaxes you, which, short term, it gives you that feeling that it does relax you, that nicotine thing. But over time, you get those nic fits and actually increase your hypertension because your body likes equilibrium. It doesn't like being thrown out of that balance. And if it's constantly hit with nicotine trying to relax it, it's going to hype itself back up. And you're going to be tense. Smokers are going to be tense, especially when they're not getting their fix. So, yeah, I would say that's related to the stroke rate in Japan. That's related to the number 1 killer here. So I will conclude this little talk about smoking, my little rant, with 2 little things I heard on the news recently. Well, after some much-needed, anti-smoking legislation went into effect, was the first tax I had ever seen went into effect. And on the news, they were interviewing people on the street, and they asked, people with this tax, is it going to affect your behavior with smoking? And a lot of people said, yeah, I'm probably going to quit because it is more expensive. That says it. Hey, the law of economics. Make it more expensive, price people out of the behavior, and people will stop. Real simple. Simple as that, okay? Make it real expensive, and people will stop doing it. So, okay. that works. Why don't we bump up the tax 10 times higher? Why do you have to target beer? Beer, okay, drinking alcohol, not much better for you, but hey, at least you're not giving off carcinogenic fumes, like me with my gaseous situation all the time. Okay, the other person they interviewed was a tobacco store, okay, and they said, and this is shocking, is a store that only sells cigarettes. I don't think I've ever seen that in the U.S. It's like a convenience store. In the U.S., you have those those cigar shops and things like that, those fine tobacco shops. But this is just selling cigarettes. And the store owner said, "Oh, it's going to hurt my business." Well, my reaction to that was, times change, my friend. People aren't buying film cameras anymore. If you're a shop selling film cameras, or maybe even newspapers for that matter, you're probably not doing all that well. Okay? Time to move on. Maybe you should start selling digital cameras instead of film. Okay? And if you're selling cigarettes, maybe it's time to move on. Not the healthiest thing to sell, you fucking cancer merchant. So, why don't you sell those smoothies that everyone likes? Those fruity smoothies, okay? Those things are popular, right? You come up with some, catchy name for it. That would be really cool to me. You go from selling cigarettes to selling smoothies, okay? Because, that's the trend right now. Everybody get healthy, lose weight. Don't start smoking and gaining weight. You're going to get a stroke. You're going to die of cancer, okay? This is not news, everybody, okay? Times change. It's time to move on. Japan, it is time for a change. And I will end the podcast with that. It's time for a change. Thanks for listening, everybody. Good night.